We're diving deep today into a topic that can be pretty tough, and that's dealing with finances after losing a spouse.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is. And we want to emphasize right off the bat, there's no need to feel pressured to sort all of this out immediately.
Exactly.
Take your time, and when you're ready, we're here to help break down a guide called Preventing Debt After the Death of a Spouse. We'll be focusing on those practical steps you can take, when the time is right for you.
It's all about empowering yourself, right?
Yeah,
With knowledge.
absolutely.
I mean, this guide is think of it as a toolkit, like you said, for navigating this really challenging and unfamiliar territory.
Okay, so let's unpack this toolkit.
Okay.
What's the first thing it recommends?
Well, it starts with getting organized, which sounds daunting,
Yeah.
right? But it's crucial to just creating a clear picture of where things stand financially. So think of it like taking inventory,
Yeah.
What were the funeral expenses?
Right?
What about estate matters? Are there any income sources like pensions or Social Security? What investments did your spouse have? And then, of course, there's the tax documents and, of course, those everyday bills that keep coming in.
It's a lot to process, especially when you're grieving.
Yeah.
The guide emphasizes the importance of seeking support during this time.
Absolutely. It encourages involving trusted family members, but at the same time stresses the need for confidentiality.
Sure.
And, maybe even more importantly, it highlights the value of professional guidance. Financial advisors, counselors, and even credit counseling services can be so valuable.
Credit counseling.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have immediately thought of that.
Yeah. That's where it gets really interesting because credit counseling isn't just about managing existing debt,
Right.
but these professionals can help you create a budget, give you some financial education.
Okay.
So they act as your partner, in navigating this new world.
So we've got our financial inventory. We're reaching out for support. What's next?
Well, the next step is really understanding debt. And this is where things can get a little tricky.
Okay.
The guide explains that while creditors might write off debt in some cases,
Okay.
it's not guaranteed, especially with co-signed accounts. Let's say you and your spouse opened a credit card together.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that debt wasn't solely yours, you could still be held responsible.
So even if I wasn't the primary borrower.
Yes, in certain situations, unfortunately. And this is particularly important to understand. If you live in a community property state.
Okay, so can you break down what a community property state is?
Sure.
And how that impacts debt responsibility?
Absolutely. So there are 9 community property states: Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin.
Okay.
In these states, a married couple's assets, they're considered jointly owned. So let's imagine, you and your spouse lived in California.
Okay.
And you bought a house together.
Right.
In the eyes of the law, you both own that house equally. But that joint ownership, it extends to debts as well. So any debt incurred during the marriage, even if it's just in one spouse's name, is considered a shared responsibility.
So even if I didn't sign, for example,
Right.
for a loan my spouse took out, I could still be held responsible in a community property state.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's why the guide really stresses understanding your rights. Don't just assume.
Yeah.
Investigate and understand the specifics of your financial situation. And this investigation, it's especially important when we're talking about avoiding a potential financial crisis.
So what does the guide recommend we do to prevent, falling into a financial crisis?
Well, it places a lot of emphasis on establishing a strong credit record in your own name.
Okay.
And this might seem like a long-term goal, especially in the midst of grief, but it can really save you from headaches down the road.
Right.
A good credit score can make it easier to secure loans,
Sure.
get better interest rates, even rent an apartment.
Right.
So if you've relied primarily on your spouse's credit history, now's the time to start building your own.
So it's about taking control of your financial future.
Exactly.
Ensuring your independence.
Yeah.
What about dealing with unexpected expenses, though?
That's where creating an emergency budget comes in. Having that financial cushion can provide incredible peace of mind.
Okay.
And going back to the credit counseling agencies, they can be really helpful in guiding you through this process.
Okay.
They can help you tailor a budget to your specific situation and teach you about responsible credit management.
So they're a good resource for establishing credit and managing expenses.
Absolutely. And here's another interesting little detail from the guide.
Okay.
Some credit card companies, they actually offer death benefits.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely worth checking if your cards have this provision.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So many things to do immediately after a spouse passes away.
Right.
Where do you even begin?
Well, the guide provides a helpful checklist. So, start with contacting family and friends,
Okay.
your place of worship, if you have one, and the funeral home. Then you'll want to reach out to the executor of the will.
And that's the person responsible for, carrying out the terms of the will.
Exactly.
Okay.
After that, you'll need to contact more official institutions like your spouse's employer, banks, insurance agencies, and don't forget the Department of Veterans Affairs if that's applicable.
So it's a long list, but it sounds crucial to cover all those bases.
It is. And while you're making those calls, the guide also recommends cutting up your spouse's credit cards.
Oh, okay.
It's a symbolic act, but also helps prevent any unauthorized use. However, you might be asked to apply for a new card in both of your names later on.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why would they ask for a new card in both names if the original cards were already joint accounts?
Well, sometimes creditors, they require a new application after a cardholder passes away. Even if it was a joint account, it's just their way of, updating their records, confirming your authorization to use the account.
So it's more of a procedural thing.
Exactly.
All right, so we're taking care of immediate needs, contacting everyone who needs to be notified.
Right.
What about the legal side of things?
Well, that's where probate often comes in, which can sound a little intimidating, but the guide assures us that it might not always be necessary, especially for smaller estates or those with certain trust structures.
Okay, so can you explain what probate is?
Sure.
And why it might not always be required?
Probate is basically the legal process of validating a will and overseeing the distribution of assets. So think of it as the court making sure your spouse's wishes, as laid out in their will, are carried out correctly.
Yeah.
It protects everyone involved and ensures, a fair and legal transfer of assets.
So when would probate not be necessary?
Well, one common scenario is when assets are held in a trust. You see, trusts, they typically bypass probate altogether because the assets are already designated to specific beneficiaries. Another instance is joint ownership with the right of survivorship. So this applies to things like bank accounts or real estate held jointly. If one owner passes away, the surviving owner automatically inherits the asset. No probate needed.
Okay.
And financial accounts with payable on death beneficiaries, those also generally avoid probate. These accounts allow you to designate a beneficiary who will automatically receive the funds upon your death.
Okay.
And then you have small estates. A lot of states have, simplified probate procedures for estates that fall below a certain value.
Gotcha.
So, makes the process less complex.
So probate isn't always this big, scary legal hurdle.
No, not at all. It's there to protect your interests.
Okay.
And here's another interesting thing the guide points out. For married couples, there's this legal concept called tenancy by the entirety. Applies specifically to real estate. If a property is held as tenants by the entirety, the surviving spouse automatically inherits the entire property when the other spouse passes away.
Okay.
Potentially bypassing probate altogether. So, powerful legal tool.
Yeah. I've actually never even heard of tenancy by the entirety before.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So it seems like understanding all these legal nuances
Absolutely.
is really crucial in navigating this whole process.
For sure. It's about arming yourself with knowledge so you can make informed decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of knowledge, we need to talk about taxes. I'm assuming those don't just disappear after a spouse passes away.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah.
But here's some good news, okay? Generally, inherited property is free of inheritance and estate taxes. The major exception is retirement funds.
So what happens with those?
That's where beneficiary designations become incredibly important. The guide really stresses reviewing those designations on all retirement accounts, like 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. You want to make sure everything's in order so you avoid unnecessary tax burdens.
Okay.
It also mentions the potential for filing separate tax returns after your spouse passes, and that estate taxes kick in for estates exceeding $600,000.
So a lot to consider there.
Yeah.
Are there any other tax-related surprises we should be aware of?
Well, there is this one interesting detail that the guide highlights, and it's called a widow's allowance.
Okay.
It's a potential source of income. that's provided from the probate estate during probate proceedings. So
Yeah.
it's essentially an allowance to help cover living expenses while the estate's being settled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That could be really helpful for some
Yeah.
families. Okay, so we're sorting through probate, trying to wrap our heads around taxes.
Hmm.
What about those everyday bills?
Right.
How do those get handled?
This is where it's crucial to differentiate between your debt, your deceased spouse's debt, and any joint debts.
Right.
Remember, you're only responsible for your own debts and any joint debts.
Okay. So what happens to my spouse's individual debts?
Those are typically covered by their estate.
Okay.
And the guide recommends using joint accounts and any funds you receive directly, for living expenses, like a life insurance payout, to handle those ongoing bills.
Okay.
It advises against using assets that are tied up in probate for this purpose.
So just keep things as straightforward as possible
Exactly.
during an already complex process. What about Social Security? Is there anything we need to know about that?
Well, the guide informs us that eligible spouses and children may qualify for a lump sum death benefit from Social Security, as well as monthly survivor benefits.
Okay.
These can provide much needed financial support during a difficult time.
Where can people go to learn more about these benefits?
Well, the Social Security Administration website is an excellent resource. You can find a wealth of information at saa.gov benefit survivors. They also have a toll-free number you can call to speak with a representative directly.
This deep dive has already provided so much valuable information. What else does the guide cover?
Well, now that we've sort of covered those initial steps, let's shift our focus to gathering the essential documents you'll need. Think of it as building your financial toolkit.
Okay, let's dive into that toolkit after a quick.
You know what? Actually, instead of taking a break, why don't we just jump right into it?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
So what documents should we be gathering?
So the guide provides a very thorough checklist. At the top of the list, of course, is the will, any trust documents.
Right.
Then you've got life insurance policies, retirement plan information, those essential certificates like birth and marriage certificates.
We're talking like big picture stuff.
Exactly. And then we move on to the specifics, property deeds, vehicle registrations, tax returns, any loan documents, a list of outstanding debts, recent bills. You want a clear picture of your current financial obligations.
It's like creating a comprehensive financial snapshot, isn't it?
Precisely. And don't forget the Social Security cards, both yours and your spouse's.
While we're gathering these documents, is there anything specific we should be mindful of?
Yes. The guide stresses the importance of obtaining multiple copies of the death certificate.
Okay.
It actually recommends having 10 to 15 copies on hand.
10 to 15. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many institutions and claims require a death certificate.
Oh, okay.
So having those extra copies readily available can save you so much time and hassle
Right.
down the line.
Yeah. One less thing to worry about.
Exactly.
That's a really practical tip. We've talked about probate, gathering documents, understanding debt. Is there anything else we need to consider in this initial phase?
Well, the guide dedicates a section to paying bills, and it offers some really sound advice.
Okay.
First and foremost, it reiterates the importance of distinguishing between your debt, your deceased spouse's debt, and any joint debts.
Right. And we know we're only responsible for our own and the joint debts, right?
Correct. The deceased spouse's estate, that will handle their individual debts.
Okay.
The guide suggests using funds from joint accounts or any money received directly for living expenses to pay those ongoing bills. It cautions against using assets that are tied up in probate for this purpose.
Right. You wouldn't want to complicate things further.
Right.
So we're getting organized, understanding our obligations, taking those initial steps. What comes next?
Well, that's where the guide kind of shifts gears a little bit
Okay.
and starts talking about planning for the future. And it acknowledges that it's incredibly difficult to even think about the future when you're grieving, but it emphasizes that it's an act of self-care
Right.
and resilience.
It's about taking control in a situation that can feel very much out of control.
Exactly. And one of the first things the guide encourages us to consider is establishing a strong credit record in our own name. We touched on this earlier,
Right.
but it's worth reiterating.
Yeah. Building a strong credit history seems so crucial in this situation.
Absolutely.
Can you elaborate on why that's so important and what challenges someone might face without it?
Sure. Imagine needing a loan for, let's say, a car repair or wanting to rent a new apartment.
Right.
Without a solid credit history of your own, you might encounter some difficulties.
Okay.
Lenders might be hesitant to approve loans, or they might offer less favorable terms,
Sure.
like higher interest rates.
Right. Right.
So, building good credit takes time. So starting sooner rather than later can really benefit you in the long run.
So it's not just about financial independence. It's also about having options,
I think.
avoiding potential roadblocks down the line.
For sure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And remember, credit counseling agencies can be incredible guides through this process. They can help you understand credit scores,
Okay.
teach you how to build credit responsibly, address any concerns you might have.
So it really seems like there's such a valuable resource throughout this whole thing.
They are.
Yeah. The guide also mentions creating an emergency budget, right?
Yes, having that financial cushion, that can provide real peace of mind.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that you have a safety net in case of unexpected expenses. Think of it as a buffer against life's uncertainties.
What else can we do to proactively plan for the future? What does the guide suggest?
One really crucial step is revisiting beneficiary designations on all of your financial accounts.
Okay.
That includes retirement accounts, life insurance policies, even bank accounts. Make sure those designations accurately reflect your current wishes.
That's something that people often overlook, I imagine.
It's easy to forget about, especially when you're dealing with a major life change.
Yeah.
But it's so important to make sure those designations are up to date.
Sure.
And while we're on the subject of planning, the guide reminds us that some credit card companies offer death benefits.
You mentioned this earlier. Can you elaborate on how common this is and what steps someone should take to find out if their cards offer this benefit?
Sure, it's not as common as some other credit card perks, but it's definitely worth investigating.
Okay.
The best way to find out is to contact your credit card companies directly.
Okay.
Ask them about their policies regarding death benefits and what documentation they require to process a claim.
Gotcha.
You might be surprised to discover that you have this added layer of financial protection.
Great tip. It's always better to be informed.
Absolutely.
Anything else we should be thinking about as we plan for the future?
Well, the guide encourages us to really think about our long-term financial goals.
Oh.
What do we want our financial life to look like? What steps can we take now to work towards those goals?
So it's about taking that financial snapshot we created earlier and using it as a roadmap.
Precisely. It's about turning a difficult situation into an opportunity to reassess, reevaluate, and take control of your financial well-being. And that brings us to the final piece of advice that the guide offers, which is seek professional guidance.
And we've talked about the value of professionals throughout this deep dive.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Because they can provide personalized advice,
Okay.
tailored to your specific circumstances. Financial advisors can help you create a solid financial plan. Attorneys can guide you through legal complexities. Therapists can provide emotional support as you navigate this challenging time.
So it's about building a team of experts to support you on this journey.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. There are resources available to help you every step of the way.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground from those initial steps after a loss to planning for the future.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one final thought I want to leave you with, something that the guide kind of hints at but doesn't explicitly state.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's the idea that navigating finances after loss, it isn't just about the practical steps, the checklist, the legalities. It's also about honoring your spouse's memory.
Yeah.
By taking care of yourself, by building a secure future, by making choices that reflect their values and your shared dreams.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. It's about finding a way to move forward, carrying their legacy with you in a way that feels both meaningful and empowering.
Exactly. And sometimes that journey starts with a single step, a single decision, a single act of courage. We'll be back after a short break to delve into the next chapter of our deep dive, where we'll explore Social Security benefits in more detail.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about planning for the future after a loss. It's a process that can feel a bit overwhelming at first, but it really is an act of self-care and resilience.
Yeah, it's about finding that sense of agency in a situation that can feel very out of control.
Yeah.
What are some tangible steps we can take to regain that sense of control?
Well, the guide highlights the importance of establishing a strong credit record in your own name. We touched on this briefly earlier,
What?
but it's worth exploring a little further.
It seems like having good credit becomes even more crucial in this context. Why is that?
Well, think of it this way. Think of it as a safety net.
Okay.
A strong credit history can make it easier to access financial resources when you need them most.
Okay.
Whether it's securing a loan for a car repair, getting approved for a mortgage, even renting a new apartment,
Right.
good credit can really open doors and provide options.
So it's not just about avoiding debt. It's
Nah.
also about having the financial freedom to make choices that support your well-being.
Exactly. And if you've primarily relied on your spouse's credit history in the past, now's the time to start building your own. It takes time and effort,
Yeah.
but it's an investment in your future financial security.
So what are some practical steps someone can take to, start building good credit?
Well, one option is to open a secured credit card in your name.
Okay.
These cards require a security deposit,
Mm.
which typically becomes your credit limit.
Okay.
By using the card responsibly, making timely payments, you can demonstrate your creditworthiness and start building that positive credit history.
Okay.
Another approach is to become an authorized user on a responsible family member or friend's credit card.
Okay.
This allows you to benefit from their good credit history
Oh, okay.
while establishing your own.
That's good to know. The guide also mentions credit counseling agencies as a resource, right?
Absolutely. Credit counselors can be incredible allies in this journey. They can provide personalized guidance, teach you the ins and outs of credit management, help you create a plan to achieve your credit goals,
No.
and they can also help you address any existing debt and create a sustainable budget.
It sounds like they offer a very holistic approach to financial well-being,
Exactly.
which is what you need during a time like this. The guide also emphasizes the importance of creating an emergency budget, right?
Yes, having that financial cushion can be a real lifesaver, especially when unexpected expenses pop up.
Right.
It's about knowing you have a safety net to fall back on.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what an emergency budget might look like?
Sure, let's say your car breaks down and you need a major repair.
Okay.
Without an emergency fund, you might be forced to rely on credit cards or high-interest loans,
Right.
which can lead to more debt.
Right. Right.
But if you have, let's say, a few $1,000s set aside for emergencies, you can cover that repair without incurring additional debt, reducing stress, maintaining financial stability.
Yeah, it's a really powerful example.
Right.
It highlights the importance of planning for those unforeseen events that inevitably will happen. What else can we do to proactively plan for the future?
Well, the guide encourages us to revisit beneficiary designations on all of our financial accounts. That includes retirement accounts, life insurance policies, even bank accounts.
Right.
Make sure those designations accurately reflect your current wishes.
And that's something that is often overlooked, isn't it? Life changes. People forget to update those beneficiary designations.
It's easy to forget about, but it's so crucial. You want to ensure that your assets are distributed according to your wishes and that your loved ones are protected.
Right.
And while we're on the subject of planning, the guide reminds us to explore any potential death benefits offered by credit card companies.
You mentioned this earlier, but can you elaborate on how common this is and what steps someone should take to find out if their cards offer this benefit?
Sure, it's not as common as some other credit card perks,
Yeah.
but it's definitely worth investigating. The easiest way to find out is to just contact your credit card companies directly and inquire about their policies. Regarding death benefits, ask about the documentation required to process a claim. You might be surprised to discover that you have this added layer of financial protection.
That's a great reminder to be proactive and explore all available options.
Absolutely.
What else should we be thinking about as we plan for the future?
Well, the guide encourages us to think about our long-term financial goals.
Okay.
What do we want our financial life to look like? What steps can we take now to work toward those goals? It might feel daunting
Right.
to think about the future when you're still grieving,
Sure.
but it's about honoring your spouse's memory by building a secure and fulfilling life for yourself.
It's about turning a painful experience into an opportunity for growth and transformation.
Exactly. It's about finding a path forward that aligns with your values and aspirations. And sometimes that path requires professional guidance.
All right, we've talked about the value of professionals throughout this whole deep dive. Why is that so important, especially when it comes to planning for the future?
Well, because they can provide expertise and support tailored to your specific situation.
Okay.
Financial advisors can help you create a solid financial plan. Attorneys can guide you through legal complexities. Therapists can provide emotional support as you navigate this challenging time. So think of it as assembling a team of experts
Okay.
to help you rebuild and thrive.
It's about recognizing that you don't have to go through this alone.
Exactly.
There are people who can help you navigate this complex landscape and make informed decisions that support your well-being.
Exactly. And remember, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and self-care. Now, let's shift our focus to another crucial aspect of navigating finances after a loss, and that is understanding the complexities of probate.
Yeah, probate. It can seem like a daunting legal process. Can you break it down, what it entails and why it's important?
Well, think of probate as the legal process of wrapping up your spouse's financial affairs.
Okay.
It's about ensuring that their debts are paid, their assets are distributed according to their wishes, and that the entire process is handled fairly and legally.
So it's essentially about bringing closure to their financial life.
Precisely. And while it might seem intimidating, it's important to remember that the probate court is there to protect your interests and ensure that everything is handled correctly.
Okay, good to know.
But yeah.
The guide mentions that probate might not always be necessary, though.
Right.
When would that be the case?
Well, there are a few scenarios where probate can be avoided.
Okay.
One common instance is when assets are held in a trust.
Okay.
Trusts allow you to designate beneficiaries who will inherit the assets directly, bypassing the probate process altogether.
Okay.
Another scenario is joint ownership with the right of survivorship.
Right.
This applies to things like bank accounts or real estate held jointly. When one owner passes away, the surviving owner automatically inherits the asset without going through probate.
So those assets essentially transfer seamlessly to the surviving owner.
Exactly.
What about financial accounts with payable on death beneficiaries?
Those also generally avoid probate.
Okay.
These accounts allow you to designate a beneficiary who will receive the funds upon your death,
Okay.
simplifying the process, reducing potential delays.
Gotcha.
And then you have smaller estates.
Right.
Many states have, simplified probate procedures for estates that fall below a certain value,
Right.
making the process less complex and time-consuming.
So probate's not a one-size-fits-all process.
Exactly. And here's another really important detail. For married couples, there's a legal concept called tenancy by the entirety, which applies specifically to real estate.
Okay.
If a property is held as tenants by the entirety, the surviving spouse automatically inherits the entire property upon the death of the other spouse,
Okay.
potentially bypassing probate altogether. It's a powerful tool that can simplify things.
It really can. It
Yeah.
seems like understanding these legal nuances can really make a difference.
Absolutely. It's about being informed and knowing your options. Now, let's delve into another potentially complex area.
Okay.
Taxes.
Yeah, taxes can be confusing even under normal circumstances.
Right.
So what do we need to know about taxes after the loss of a spouse?
Well, here's some good news. Generally, inherited property is free of inheritance and estate taxes.
Oh, that's a relief. Are there any exceptions to that rule?
The main exception is retirement funds.
So what are the tax implications of inheriting retirement funds?
That's where beneficiary designations become incredibly important.
Okay.
The guide stresses the need to review those designations on all retirement accounts, like 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. You want to make sure everything is in order so you avoid unnecessary tax burdens. It also mentions that for estates exceeding $600,000, federal estate taxes might kick in.
A lot to consider when it comes to taxing. Are there any other potential surprises or helpful tips that the guide offers in this area?
Well, one interesting detail the guide highlights is a widow's allowance.
Okay.
This allowance, it comes from the probate estate
Okay.
during probate proceedings
Okay.
and is intended to help cover living expenses while the estate is being settled. So it's essentially a way to provide financial support during a vulnerable time.
That's good to know. Sounds like there are resources available to help ease that financial burden.
Yeah.
What about those everyday bills that they keep coming? How do we manage those after a loss?
Well, this is where it's crucial to differentiate between your debt, your deceased spouse's debt, and any joint debts.
Right.
Remember, you are only responsible for your own debts and any joint debts.
Right.
Your deceased spouse's individual debts, those are typically covered by their estate.
So their estate essentially becomes responsible for settling their individual debts.
Yeah.
What's the best way to handle paying those everyday bills?
The guide recommends using funds from joint accounts or any money received directly for living expenses, like a life insurance payout,
Okay.
to handle those ongoing bills. It advises against using assets that are tied up in probate
Right.
for this purpose, as that can complicate matters.
Right. So keep things straightforward as possible.
Exactly. And remember, if you're struggling to manage bills or create a budget, credit counseling agencies can provide valuable assistance.
Okay.
They can help you create a plan to address your financial obligations and stay on track.
Seems like they're a recurring theme
Yeah,
in this guide, and for good reason.
for good reason.
Now let's move on to another important topic. Social Security benefits.
Okay.
What do we need to know about accessing those benefits after the loss of a spouse?
Well, Social Security can provide crucial financial support
Okay.
for surviving spouses
Uh-huh.
and dependents. The guide informs us that eligible spouses and children may qualify for a lump sum death benefit from Social Security, as well as monthly survivor benefits.
Okay.
These benefits can help alleviate financial stress and provide a sense of security during a difficult time.
That could be a lifeline for many families. Where can people go to learn more about these benefits and determine their eligibility?
The Social Security Administration website is an excellent resource. You can find a wealth of information at saa.gov benefits survivors.
Oh.
They also have a toll-free number you can call to speak with a representative directly. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're there to help.
This deep dive has covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
We've gone from those initial steps after a loss to gathering essential documents, navigating probate, understanding tax implications, managing bills, now accessing Social Security benefits. What's the most important takeaway you hope our listeners gain from this conversation?
More than anything, I want listeners to understand that they're not alone in this journey. This guide provides valuable information
Right.
and practical steps.
Sure.
But it's essential to remember that there's a human element to all of this.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate to reach out to friends, family, or support groups for emotional support.
It's a reminder that financial decisions are often intertwined with emotional well-being.
Absolutely. And if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or unsure about what steps to take, don't hesitate to seek professional guidance.
Right.
Financial advisors, attorneys, therapists. These professionals can provide expertise and support tailored to your unique situation.
Right. It's about building a network of support and recognizing that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Exactly. And remember, even amidst the grief and the practicalities,
Yeah.
there's room for hope. Hope for a future where you can honor your spouse's memory by living a life that reflects their love and your shared dreams. Now, after a short break, let's wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and insights.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into managing finances after the loss of a spouse. We've covered a lot of ground, from those initial steps, gathering important documents, to understanding probate and taxes, and now we'll focus on a crucial aspect: Social Security benefits.
Yeah, Social Security benefits, they can be a real lifeline for surviving spouses and dependents, offering some much-needed financial support during this difficult time. The guide actually does a great job of breaking down the essentials, starting with the lump sum death benefit.
Okay, and this is a one-time payment, right?
Exactly. It's currently set at $255, and it's intended to kind of help cover those immediate expenses following a death. While it's not a huge amount, it can still provide some relief, especially when, every little bit helps.
Right, I imagine it can help with things like funeral costs.
Exactly. Or, any other unexpected expenses that might come up.
Sure.
But the more substantial support comes in the form of those monthly survivor benefits. And these benefits are available to eligible spouses and children, and they're based on the deceased spouse's earnings history.
So the amount someone receives isn't like a fixed number, it varies.
Right. It varies depending on individual circumstances. And that's why the guide stresses the importance of contacting the Social Security Administration directly to get personalized information and determine your eligibility.
That makes sense. I mean, it's a complex system.
Yeah.
Everyone's situation is different. So where can people go to learn more about these benefits and how to apply?
Well, like I said, the Social Security Administration website is a fantastic resource.
Right.
You can find, really detailed information on survivor benefits at saosa.gov benefit survivors. And they also have a toll-free number you can call to speak with a representative.
Okay.
So don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're there to help.
Sounds like a valuable resource.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive, is there a key message you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I think more than anything, I want listeners to understand that they're not alone on this journey.
Right.
We've talked about this guide a lot today. It provides a lot of valuable information and practical steps, but it's important to remember that there's a human element to all of this.
Yeah.
And don't hesitate to reach out to friends, families, support groups, for emotional support.
It's a good reminder that financial decisions are often very intertwined with emotional well-being, right?
Absolutely. And if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or unsure about what steps to take, don't hesitate to seek professional guidance. Financial advisors, attorneys, therapists, these professionals can provide expertise and support tailored to your unique situation.
It's about building a network of support and recognizing that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Exactly. And remember, even amidst all the grief and the practicalities, there's still room for hope. Hope for a future where you can honor your spouse's memory by living a life that reflects their love and your shared dreams.
This deep dive has been so insightful, so empowering.
Good.
We've covered so much ground, and I feel like we've provided our listeners with the knowledge and the resources they need to navigate this really challenging chapter.
I hope so.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, remember, take things one step at a time, be kind to yourself, and don't hesitate to seek support when you need it.